It was a call no parent ever wants to receive. On the morning of March 23, 1993, Carmen Van Huss's father was told that his daughter hadn't shown up for work. Concerned, he immediately drove over to her apartment, hoping it was just a misunderstanding. But as he approached the door, an uneasy feeling settled in his chest. The quiet of the apartment wasn't right. When he opened the door, he walked into a nightmare. His beloved daughter, Carmen, was gone, brutally murdered in her own home. The scene was chaotic, as if she had fought for her life. But the real question was, who had she fought against? Neighbors had seen Carmen return home the night before with an unidentified man. They'd heard raised voices, a heated argument, and eventually, the sound of someone fleeing the scene. But who was this man? Why had Carmen trusted him enough to invite him in? And how did a night that started out so normal take such a horrific turn? This is the story of a talented young woman whose life was violently cut short, a family left in unimaginable grief, and the relentless search for answers that would take over 3 decades to uncover. But before we dive into it, I'd like to ask a small favor. The statistics show that more than 70% of you watching aren't subscribed to the channel yet. If you're enjoying these deep dives into true crime and want to stay updated on future videos, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel and ensures you don't miss out on any new cases. Now, without further ado, let's get back to the case. Carmen Hope Van Huss was a bright and talented 19-year-old woman who had her whole life ahead of her. Living in Indianapolis in 1993, she was deeply passionate about art, which was evident from her enrollment at Indiana University Purdue University Indianapolis, IUPUI. Carmen's ambition was to carve out a career in the arts, a field where she was not only skilled, but deeply engaged. Her brother, Jimmy Van Huss, often spoke about Carmen's vibrant personality. She was not just creative but also kind-hearted, known for her deep love of animals. It was common for her to bring home stray cats, a testament to her nurturing and empathetic nature. This compassion extended beyond animals to everyone she encountered. Family, friends, and even acquaintances described her as someone who was always smiling and full of life. By March 1993, Carmen was living independently in an apartment in a quiet section of Indianapolis. The days leading up to her murder were unremarkable in their normalcy, which is perhaps what made the eventual events even more shocking. Carmen spent time with her family, including her grandmother, who was very dear to her. In a tragic twist of fate, Carmen's grandmother passed away on the day of her funeral, adding another layer of grief to an already heartbreaking situation for the Van Huss family. On the evening of March 22, 1993, Carmen Hope Van Huss left her father's home in Indianapolis to return to her apartment, unaware that it would be her final night alive. Neighbors later reported seeing her arrive at her apartment with an unidentified man. Given Carmen's sociable nature, this did not raise any immediate red flags. Carmen was known to be friendly and welcoming, often having guests over, so the presence of a male visitor didn't appear out of the ordinary to those around her. As the night wore on, however, the quiet soon shifted into something more alarming. Neighbors recalled hearing raised voices coming from Carmen's apartment, with the argument escalating in intensity. The shouting soon turned into what sounded like a physical struggle, with thudding noises that could be heard through the walls. The final sound they reported was the heavy, hurried footsteps of someone fleeing the scene, running down the hallway, followed by an eerie silence that left the neighbors with a lingering sense of unease. The following morning, on March 23, 1993, Carmen's father became worried when his daughter failed to show up for work, which was highly unusual for her. Carmen was known for being punctual and responsible, making her absence all the more alarming. As the minutes ticked by, unease turned to dread. Growing increasingly concerned, he decided to go to her apartment to check on her, hoping against hope that it was just a misunderstanding or that she had overslept. But what awaited him inside was nothing short of a nightmare, a scene that would forever etch itself into the minds of the Van Huss family and leave them shattered. Carmen had been savagely attacked, stabbed more than 60 times in a brutal, rage-filled assault. The sheer ferocity of the attack stunned investigators and left them speechless. The violence unleashed on Carmen was so extreme that it was clear this wasn't a simple robbery gone wrong or a random attack. This was personal. Imagine walking into the home of a loved one, expecting to find them safe, only to be confronted with unspeakable horror. Carmen's father faced that heart-wrenching moment as he stood in disbelief in her apartment. Overturned furniture, scattered clothing, and broken objects painted a horrifying picture of the desperate struggle she endured. Carmen had fought fiercely for her life, but despite her efforts, the savagery of the assault was too much. Her final moments had been filled with terror, chaos, and a desperate will to survive. The crime scene was a picture of raw, unbridled violence. It was as if the apartment itself had absorbed the brutality of that night. The broken furniture, the splintered wood, the torn fabric, all signs of the battle Carmen waged against her attacker. Investigators noted every detail, trying to piece together the final moments of her life. There was no doubt in their minds that this was not the work of a stranger or a random intruder. This attack had a deeply emotional, personal motive behind it. One of the first chilling discoveries they made was that there was no sign of forced entry into Carmen's apartment. The door was unlocked, which immediately set off alarm bells. Could it be that Carmen had known her killer? Had she trusted them enough to let them in, completely unaware of the danger that awaited her? This theory seemed even more plausible when neighbors reported hearing her arrive at her apartment with an unknown man the night before. It painted a grim picture, Carmen, feeling safe, walking into her home with someone she knew, only to have the trust she placed in that person violently shattered. The evidence inside the apartment was equally disturbing. The scene wasn't just chaotic. It was the aftermath of a violent struggle. She didn't go down without a battle, but what shocked investigators the most was the discovery that Carmen had been attacked with not one, but 2 different weapons. The killer used both a pocket knife and a screwdriver to inflict over 60 stab wounds on her body. 60. Let that sink in for a moment. The killer's rage was palpable in every single one of those strikes. Each stab wound a testament to the uncontrollable fury that drove them. This wasn't a premeditated, carefully planned murder. It was an explosion of rage, hatred, or perhaps jealousy. Something so powerful that it turned an encounter into an unspeakable bloodbath. The use of multiple weapons also hinted at a sudden, unplanned escalation of violence. This was a heat-of-the-moment crime, where emotions spiraled out of control, leading to an unspeakable act of brutality. Why would someone have so much hatred for Carmen? What could have driven the killer to such an extreme? As investigators sifted through the wreckage of her apartment, one thing became clear. Carmen's murder wasn't just about ending her life. It was about sending a message, fueled by personal animosity or unresolved conflict, a message delivered through unrelenting violence. Who was this person she trusted enough to let into her home? And what caused the situation to escalate into such a horrifying attack? These questions would plague investigators as they pieced together Carmen's final hours. The puzzle was far from complete, but one thing was certain. The killer was someone with a deep emotional connection to Carmen, and uncovering their identity would require peeling back layers of her personal life, secrets, and relationships. Despite these clues, though, identifying a suspect proved to be far more difficult. Police canvassed the area, questioning neighbors about what they had seen and heard. While many remembered the sounds of a heated argument and someone running down the hallway after the fight, no one had gotten a clear look at the man with Carmen that night. The vague descriptions from neighbors hindered the investigation, as no eyewitness could positively identify the man who had been with Carmen before the argument broke out. From the start, detectives suspected that this crime was personal due to the intensity of the violence. They thoroughly interviewed Carmen's family, friends, and acquaintances, hoping to uncover anyone who might have had a motive to harm her. But these interviews led nowhere. Carmen had a reputation for being friendly, social, and warm-hearted, with no known enemies. She wasn't involved in any risky behaviors or dangerous relationships that could provide clues about a potential motive. The investigation seemed to hit a wall as detectives struggled to find anyone who might want to harm her. One of the most promising pieces of evidence was DNA collected from the crime scene, and the investigators hoped that this genetic material might eventually provide the key to solving the case. However, despite their best efforts, the DNA did not match any profiles in the existing databases at the time. Investigators continued to search for leads, but as the months turned into years, the case grew cold. Nevertheless, Carmen's family, especially her brother Jimmy, refused to let the case fade away. Jimmy became a vocal advocate, keeping his sister's story in the public eye and pushing for justice. The case saw a glimmer of hope when, in 2013, Detective Sergeant William Carter of the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department began reviewing the case. Although Carter wasn't officially part of the cold case squad, Carmen's story struck a personal chord with him, and he committed his spare time to investigating it. Carter wasn't just rereading files, but he was looking at the case with fresh eyes. He was particularly focused on the DNA evidence that had been collected in 1993, convinced that it held the key to solving the crime, especially with the advancements in forensic science that had been made since then. Realizing that keeping Carmen's case alive in the public's mind was crucial to securing the resources needed to move forward, Carter created a Facebook page called Justice for Carmen Van Huss. Through this page, he raised awareness about Carmen's murder and the challenges faced by the investigation, drawing attention to the need for more advanced DNA testing. The page allowed Carmen's story to reach a broader audience and reignited interest in the case, particularly within the community. By 2015, Carter's dedication to the case had reached a new level when he, along with Jimmy Van Huss, started a GoFundMe campaign to raise money for a new round of DNA testing. Earlier DNA tests had been inconclusive, largely due to errors made by the crime lab, where the wrong samples had been tested. These mistakes were frustrating setbacks, but Carter and Jimmy were not deterred. They knew the DNA evidence held the potential to reveal Carmen's killer. The GoFundMe campaign was a resounding success, raising over $1,200, more than enough to cover the costs of the advanced DNA testing. Both Carter and Jimmy contributed their own funds to the effort, underscoring their personal investment in seeing the case solved. This grassroots effort showcased how much the case meant not only to Carmen's family, but to the larger community. However, their success was short-lived. When Carter requested that the city's crime lab proceed with new testing, he was met with bureaucratic resistance. The lab refused to pay for further tests, and when Carter continued to push for the testing, he was abruptly removed from the case. This decision sparked outrage, particularly from Jimmy, who saw Carter as the only person genuinely committed to solving his sister's murder. Despite the setback, however, Jimmy and Detective Carter's efforts to fund the DNA testing would eventually prove instrumental in solving the case. In early 2024, after decades of frustration, law enforcement finally revisited the DNA evidence that had been collected from the crime scene at Carmen Van Huss's apartment. This new investigation utilized advanced forensic techniques that had not been available during the initial examination in 1993. Genetic genealogy, a groundbreaking method in forensic science, was the key to this breakthrough. The process involves using DNA databases, which include genetic information from people who submit their DNA for ancestry purposes to trace family connections. Investigators were able to use this technique to match DNA found at the scene of Carmen's murder to a distant relative of Donna Germaine Shepherd, a man who had lived in Indianapolis at the time of Carmen's death. Shepherd, who had since moved to Missouri and had been working as a custodian at the University of Missouri, had no prior criminal record, allowing him to avoid detection for over 30 years. However, the newly analyzed DNA evidence finally placed him at the scene of the crime, leading investigators directly to him. In September 2024, Dana Germaine Shepherd was arrested in Boone County, Missouri, and charged with 2 counts of murder and 1 count of rape in connection with Carmen's murder. He was quickly extradited to Indiana, where the legal process would unfold. Shepherd's arrest was the moment the Van Huss family had been waiting for, although the legal proceedings had just begun. At the time of his arrest, Shepherd had not yet entered a plea, but the DNA evidence was expected to play a central role in the upcoming trial. For Jimmy Van Huss, Carmen's brother, this arrest was the culmination of a long and emotionally exhausting journey. After their father, James Van Huss, passed away in a tragic car accident in 2002, Jimmy had taken on the role of advocating for justice for his sister. Over the years, he organized vigils, raised awareness through social media, and worked alongside Detective Sergeant William Carter to keep the case alive. Carter's personal investment in the case and his eventual collaboration with Jimmy were pivotal in driving the investigation forward, even when it seemed hopeless. The arrest of Shepherd marked a significant turning point, not only for the Van Huss family, but also for the community that had been haunted by Carmen's brutal murder for over 3 decades. While the legal process would take time, the arrest brought renewed hope that justice would finally be served. It's a bittersweet moment for the Van Huss family and the community. Closure finally seems within reach, but nothing can bring Carmen back. What do you think about cold cases like this one being solved after so many years? Should the justice system allocate more resources to such cases, or focus more on ongoing investigations? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video compelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us keep uncovering these important stories. Hit the bell icon so you don't miss our next video.